A little boy full of trust and adoring love looked up at his father. "Daddy, are you afraid of the dark?" "No." "Are you afraid of snakes?" "Well, there are no snakes that can really harm you here, no." "Are you afraid of long, slimy worms?" "No, no fear of them at all." And the boy looked up at his father and said with utmost seriousness, "So the only thing you're afraid of is Mom?" What are the things that you are afraid of? What are the things which rob you of sleep and a sense of peace and contentment? If you're a baby boomer like I am, we often heard that we were living in an age of anxiety. After the Holocaust, we knew of the human capacity for evil and the possibility of total destruction since we had entered into the age of the nuclear bomb. Kids at school participated in drills, huddling under desks as if they would protect them. There were some who purchased potassium iodide pills as a guard against radiation. The rich were building bunkers in the distant hills, stocked with water and imperishables, and a menacing stack of automatic weapons in case there were desperate survivors or looters on the outside. The age of anxiety was a phrase coined by W.H. Auden and was the title of his book of poetry, in which four friends gather one evening in a pub in Manhattan and begin sharing their fears and doubts into the early hours of the morning. Many reviewers did not think it was very good poetry, but it won him a Pulitzer Prize. Leonard Bernstein wrote a symphony inspired by its message. The title, The Age of Anxiety, captured a mood which we can understand and relate to in our time. We're still living in an age of anxiety. 18% of the population, about 1 in 5, suffer anxiety disorder. It is the most common psychiatric complaint. There are many who are heavily medicated with Xanax. Some are worried about climate change and global warming. All around the world, we have been experiencing extreme weather events. Said a U.S. Senator this past summer, California is burning, Oregon is burning, Greece is burning, Siberia is burning, and we could, of course, add Spain. One of the most powerful hurricanes ever made landfall in the Gulf Coast just days ago. There's horrific drought impacting countries throughout the world, and July was the hottest month ever recorded. Scientists say the effects of global warming is guaranteed to intensify in the next 30 years. We're going to have hotter heat waves, more intense droughts, and more catastrophic flooding. In some universities, over 70% of the students described themselves as suffering from eco-anxiety. Or think of the anxiety created by COVID and its deadly spawn of variants. Parents are worried for their children and the changing rules to attend or stay home from school. But as bad as COVID can get, there are those who fear the vaccine even more, with conspiracy theories feeding their deeply rooted phobias. Floods, tornadoes, viruses, population explosion, shortages of drinking water, drought, and conflict. A friend asked me not long ago, "Do you think we are coming to the end of the world?" A serious question. What kind of world will there be for our children and their children? In what way does David's psalm and its soaring faith and confidence speak to us? "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Should I fear anyone?" The Lord is the fortress protecting my life. Should I be frightened of anything? Perhaps there was a day for David when those words could roll off his tongue with ease. With the brash courage of youth and the swagger that God was with him, he had felled Goliath with a slingshot. He had become the darling of the people. He was invited to be the court musician, to calm the jagged nerves of the reigning monarch, King Saul. Life couldn't be better. He was heady with faith and confidence. But then life would catch up with him. King Saul was flushed with jealousy and wanted him dead. He hurled a spear at David and missed by a whisker. David could no longer be the harpist in the palace of the king. And the bad news kept rolling in. His best friend David was decapitated in battle. And the day came, thankfully, when Saul was no more. He too was killed in battle. And David ascended to the throne. But he did not receive a pass on pain and suffering. His child with Bathsheba became deathly ill. He fasts and prays, but God is not there, seemingly, to help him. His child dies. His charismatic eldest son, Absalom, led a rebellion to take over the throne, and David had to flee for his life. Where was God then? When in the end Absalom was trapped in a tree, David's commander Joab thrust 3 darts into his heart. But there was no triumph for David in his son's death. He tore his robes and cried out in inconsolable grief, O Absalom, my son, would that I had died in your place." David was dear to the heart of God, but his faith did not protect him from the harshest moments of human experience. Life at times is utterly unfair, and being a good man or woman does not protect one from its vagaries. We must take reasonable precautions, but there is no escaping the cruel twists of life, which are a part of our earthly experience. C.S. Lewis marries Joy Davidman, but a few months later she is dead of cancer. Harold Kushner writes his book When Bad Things Happen to Good People after his 17-year-old son dies of progeria. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane faces an ugly and humiliating end. He groans in agony, "Let this cup pass from me," but there is no escaping the cross. Or think of the apostles and martyrs, burned at the stake or impaled or fed to hungry wild animals in the early years of the Christian church. How could they bear the unbearable? How could they sing of God's goodness and grace? What is it that sustained them? It was more than stoicism. There was faith. But what does that mean? How can faith help you? A brief excursus here. I enjoy the works of Michael Ondaatje for his scintillating descriptions of ordinary events and places. He's a Tamil-speaking writer originally from Sri Lanka, famous for his book The English Patient, which was made into a movie. He came to Canada as a young man and is now an officer of the Order of Canada. His book Anil's Ghost is set in the context of civil war in Sri Lanka. There is bloodshed, revenge, and of course retaliation, each round escalating the brutality. With war there is always intemperate violence. In the last chapter of his book, we see a broken-hearted man who has lost his wife to the war. He has nothing to live for, but he is slowly rebuilding and chiseling a statue of the Buddha. His faith was saying to him he was part of something far bigger than himself. And that is what faith means. It says we are a part of something far bigger than ourselves. I wonder if you can hold on to that truth. And more, that our God is a God of love, who sent to us his Son Jesus to tell us so. And as Paul says in Romans 8, there's nothing in all of creation which can keep us from his love. That is a faith, a conviction, that enables you to face any threatening fears, knowing that the God of creation is on your side, that we are part of something far bigger than ourselves, that we are part of God's family. Bad things may happen, but that kind of faith frees you to give of yourself to others, to turn the other cheek, to be unconcerned about status and place, and not minding being the underdog, living as if love is all that matters. Because that is God's way, as shown to us in Jesus Christ. How do you nourish that kind of faith? What is so dominant in the Psalms is the perception and joy of God's presence. Some experience God in the small, quiet voice, as did Elijah amid the sound and fury of a storm. Some may experience him like the huddled disciples in the upper room on the day of Pentecost, as they broke out in ecstasy. Some experience God's presence in hymns and liturgy, or in the reading of sacred scripture, or in the wonder and beauty of his creation. I think of Annie Dillard and her perception of God in the marvels of nature in Tinker Creek, or the inspiring words of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, "Earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush is ablaze with God. Those who see take off their shoes, the rest just sit around and pick blackberries." I enjoy looking at our backyard garden in the morning and seeing 3 different kinds of sunflowers, all craning for the sun. Russian mammoth in the back, soaring almost 12 feet high. Moulin Rouge, Del Sol, and the cosmos. And I'm deeply grateful for their gentle reminder to me of the God of creation. Dear friends, amid your fears and anxieties, and in our troubled world, practice the presence of God. Be mindful. Look up mindful Christianity if you wish. Breathe deeply, and as you're inhaling, think of your breath as the very breath of God's Spirit. Just think of God's Spirit coming into you and infusing every part of who you are. Let it be for you a daily exercise. See God in the little things around you, and let faith take the place of fear.